Jingmei is the colonized, or the other, and her parents, mainly her mother, are the colonizers. So Jingmei is marginalized and oppressed by her mother. Her voice is silenced, and she is shaped by her mother and her expectations. Her mother is, she says, of course you can be a prodigy too. And when she sees all these like other kids doing prodigious things, and puts Jingmei through a million trials to see like if she's good at remembering pages of the Bible or tap dancing. Um, they don't find anything. Um, and after one particular session, including attempting to memorize some pages of the Bible just by looking at them, she remembers less than a sentence. And after it, she says, something inside of me began to die. I hated the tests, the raised hopes, and failed expectations, because she had been through, I don't know, 20 or 30 of these, oh, maybe I'll be a prodigy at this. But then when she's not, it's like these raised hopes and failed expectations. Um, so finally, a few pages into the story, her mother finds a man, Mr. Chong, who lives downstairs, who will give her piano lessons. And so Jingmei must practice from 4 to 6 in the evening every day to learn piano and become a prodigy at it. So the talent show is somewhat of a disaster for Jingmei. It's the culmination of, it says, about a year of Jingmei taking piano lessons but being determined not to try. And a few months before the talent show, her mother is bragging to Auntie Lindo, the mother of Waverly, the chess champion, about. So her mother brags to Auntie Lindo about her musical talent, and Jingmei is even more determined to put a stop to her foolish pride. Jingmei, she doesn't want to be a prodigy. She doesn't want to bend to her mother's will and do as she is told. She has a temper, as we can see, and but she still has to do what her mother says because she's a child. She's like 9 or 10, I think. In one notable fight, Jingmei yells, "I'm not a genius," and her mother responds, "Who asked you be genius? Only ask you be your best," and then mutters, "So ungrateful." So it's kind of she's not a genius, and her mother is asking her to do better. She's kind of demanding that she do better. And when Jingmei can't do well enough for her mother, partially because she doesn't really try, then her mother's like, "You're so ungrateful. You're such a spoiled little kid." So the mother, as the colonizer, she immigrated from China and lost her family and her house and, like, I think Landon said. So she believed that you could be anything you wanted to be in America, which is kind of this regular, like really common idea of coming to America. Um, and so she pushes this prodigiousness onto Jingmei, even though Jingmei doesn't want to, and she resists, and she eventually refuses after the talent show. Um, and she really wants for Jingmei to be exceptional at something, kind of like a living vicariously kind of thing, because her mother was lived in the during the Chinese Civil War and escaped right before the rise of Chinese communism. So she's too old to become prodigious at something in America, so she really wants Jingmei to be able to be like successful and famous and uh, like American, you know? And so Jingmei says that my mother told me what my schedule would be for piano lessons and piano practice. She had no input in it, and her mother never consulted her and never asked if she even wanted to play the piano. Um, Throughout most of the story, the mother's attitude is it's loving, but in a hard way. It's kind of like, I don't care if you want it or not. I'm doing what's best for you, what I believe is best for you. Um, so again, with the kind of living vicariously, kind of plowing over what Jingmei wants and instead doing what she believes is better than what Jingmei wants. So the discussion questions. So I focused on Jingmei and the mother as the colonized and the colonizer. And there are like a couple other possibilities besides the other one that I said at the beginning, and support those with textual evidence. And then interpret the conflict between Jing Mei and her mother as cultural conflict, not just mother-daughter conflict. And then here's some works cited. And Cole's going to present because he couldn't be here today in class to present. So I'll attach that to the end of this.
Okay, so next is the feminist lens. So to start out, Amy Tan's Joy Luck Club, from which this short story comes, includes a lot of feminist themes, including those of Jessica Benjamin, who is a psychoanalyst and philosopher who developed the theory of feminist matrilinealism, which is sort of complicated and we don't really need to understand for the sake of this presentation. But part of it is that storytelling is essential to female liberation, even if those stories are transmitted unintentionally between mothers and daughters. And as you can see in this quote from Yu, who wrote one of our academic sources, from the viewpoint of feminist matrilinealism, storytelling is an essential device which allows once silenced mothers to voice long hidden secrets of suffering and victimization and to transform them into an affirmation of their own strength and perseverance as survivors. So the Joy Luck Club emphasizes the stories that are told by the members of the club and allows, although I haven't read the book, according to this author, for the liberation of its members by the end of the book. However, Jing Mei's mother has difficulty achieving liberation for herself and for Jing Mei because she has difficulty transmitting these stories for two reasons. The first of which is language. Even though Jing Mei can speak Chinese, it's implied throughout the story that she speaks English primarily, and even her mother also tries to speak English throughout the story, but it's often in a sort of broken English, as we can see in this quote from paragraph 2, and that demonstrates the inability of Jing Mei's mother in transmitting the ideas and experiences that she's held throughout her life to her daughter, and thereby achieving liberation for herself or for her daughter, which is something that especially the mother struggles with throughout the story, as we'll see as we go on. And then secondly, is the cultural differences between the two. Even though they grew up in the same household, Jing Mei discusses her mother as though her mother is a foreign other, and she presents in paragraphs 1 and 3 the ideals that her mother has regarding America. And in a lot of ways, they're naive and oversimplified and demonstrate the sort of idealistic vision that a lot of immigrants have of America. And again, it's presented as being somewhat naive, saying that she believes that you could be anything that you wanted to be, and that America was where all her hopes lay. Whereas Jing Mei, it is implied, has a somewhat more mature firsthand experience of what America really is. And as a result, by creating this dichotomy early in the story, Jing Mei establishes herself and her mother as being on opposite ends of sort of the cultural spectrum of Asian Americans. And as a result, there's increased difficulty in her mother in kind of getting through to Jing Mei. And then additionally, Jing Mei's mother, as I briefly alluded to in the last section, represents a replication of patriarchal norms. And part of this is because, as Benjamin discussed, she had a difficulty achieving liberation through storytelling. One of the clearest examples of her replication of patriarchal norms is in paragraph 6, in which she sends Jing Mei to a beauty school in order to make her more like Shirley Temple. And this demonstrates that even at the young age of, I believe, 8, was Jing Mei's age at this point in the story, she's already being degraded to a beauty standard. And even though it's sort of cliche at this point, objectified and being treated as sort of an object rather than a person, even though she's only 8 years old. And this reveals, according to Yi, which is one of the academic authors that we cite, the cruelty and omnipresence of patriarchal culture, because even the women that are involved are replicating it. So a lot of times people sort of view feminism as a fight against male sexism, but according to a lot of the authors from which Amy Tan derives inspiration, it's more of a fight against patriarchal structures that are so deeply ingrained that even women can be participants and replicate them. And this demonstrates through Jing Mei's mom that liberation requires more than just being female, and Jingmei's mom is unable to achieve that liberation, and as a result, replicates those norms onto her daughter. And then finally, Candioti is our final author here, and he came up with the idea of the patriarchal bargain, um, which is, as you can see in his quote, that women strategize within a different set of concrete constraints. Different forms of patriarchy present women with distinct rules of the game and call for different strategies to maximize security and optimize life options with varying potential for active or passive resistance in the face of oppression. So essentially, women are presented with a bargain in which they have to relinquish aspects of their personal self in order to operate within the constraints of patriarchy. And in this case, the aspect of the bargain that we're discussing is the expectation that women refuse engagement in personal pleasure for the sake of personal security. And this bargain is presented to both Waverly and Jingmei. And Jingmei's mother even explicitly presents this bargain to Jingmei in paragraph 74, in which she states that there are only two kinds of daughters, those who are obedient and those who follow their own mind. And at this point in the story, Jingmei starts to achieve liberation, in which she says that she wishes she wasn't her daughter, rebelling against her mom, and thereby rebelling against the patriarchal bargain that her mom is presenting her. On the other hand, Waverly um, concedes to this patriarchal bargain that is presented by her mom. As we can see in paragraph 44, Waverly used to be just essentially a normal girl who would squabble with Jingmei over crayons and dolls, and yet by now, at age 9, she had achieved fame as Chinatown's littlest Chinese chess champion and had conceded to her mother's expectation that she relinquished the sort of childish things that Jingmei was still enjoying at when she was 9 years old, in favor of security and in favor of fame, which is sort of the bargain that's being placed on both daughters. Waverly accepts it, and Jingmei denies it. So to summarize, Benjamin argued that storytelling was necessary for female liberation, but Jingmei's mother had a lot of difficulty transmitting those stories, and this is part of the reason that she replicated a patriarchal structure, as Yi was arguing, and that demonstrates the powerful nature of patriarchy. And finally, Kandioki argued that women must exchange aspects of their identity in favor of security. Waverly accepts this bargain, whereas Jingmei achieves liberation towards the end of the story by not accepting it. And then our two interpretive questions. First, does Jingmei achieve liberation by the end of the story? Guess I kind of buried the lead on that one. And does her mother? And then how does Jingmei's father's reaction to her piano recital either add to or detract from the feminist themes of the story?